Okay. Pearl Harbor as an intelligence community failure. So the bottom line is that the intelligence community failed in collection, analysis, and management. On December 7, 1941, a surprise military strike by the Japanese Imperial Navy against the United States Naval Base at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, killed over 2,400 Americans, injured over 1,000, sunk or damaged 8 battleships, and destroyed about 200 aircraft. But before December 1941, the US Japanese relationship had already been exacerbated. There had been a series of America's discriminatory treaties against the Japanese. Japan withdrew from the League of Nations. There was increased aggression from Japan in East Asia. The American government renounced its commercial treaty with Japan and also had placed exports of aviation fuel and high grade scrap iron and steel under license. And then the US froze Japanese assets and placed an oil embargo against Japan when they invaded the southern part of French Indochina. Now, the US knew that there would be an attack from Japan. They just never knew when, where, or how. Negotiations between the US and Japan to avoid war kept leading to stalemates. Um, Almost all American officers did not imagine that the Japanese would attack such a far location from its homeland. And this is a bias considering that they think they're thinking what someone would do based on usual human thinking and patterns. The US intelligence underestimated Japan's military capabilities and willingness to launch a surprise attack on a major US base, leading to a false sense of security. Um, the failure of collection was because the information that they did have did not state what was needed, like when, where, and how. Um, in fact, the in 19 January 1941, the Peruvian minister to Tokyo informed the first secretary of the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo of a Japanese military plan on a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor. But this source was not considered reliable, firstly, because there was no evidence to support this claim, and secondly, because the original source was from the Peruvian Japanese cook who had no connection, nothing to do with the Japanese military operation from what they saw. Failure within analysis, there was a failure to connect the dots. There was a failure to synthesize information from various sources, which would have indicated that um, an attack on Pearl Harbor was imminent. Analysts did not connect the growing tensions with Japan to possible military strike on such a big US base. If the US had appropriately analyzed the available information, it might have prevented or at least reduced damages to the Pearl Harbor base. The US intercepted messages where Japanese diplomats were ordered to destroy most of their codes and ciphers at once and to burn all other important confidential and secret documents. In hindsight, officers saw this as the most significant warning to the theater commanders and a clear signal for a full alert. The US assumed an attack on US soil was too risky for the Japanese to commit. And this was a misperception on opponents' thinking. With all evidence indicating the Japanese army would continue its aggression in the Southwest Pacific, the Military Intelligence Division intelligence estimates focused on that region instead. Um, there was also a failure in management. Both Army and Navy intelligence organizations had been undermanned since World War One. There was growth in 1941, but that came too late, as normally with intelligence, it needs a lot of time to gather information, analyze all that. So they didn't have that advantage. They weren't able to evaluate the enemy's intentions as they would have if they had that long lasting intelligence organization. There was also no joint command in Hawaii encompassing both Army and Navy. And there were messages sent out to both Admiral Kimmel and General Short on the upcoming threat from Japan, but those messages were different. They weren't the same message sent to both of them, and they were perceived in different ways. Colonel Bratton and Admiral Turner, the Army and Navy chiefs, thought that these warnings would lead to a full alert of forces in Hawaii and the Philippines. But the ambiguity as to the nature of the threat and the inconsistencies in tone of the two dispatches um, uh, kind of made for a different reaction from both Kimmel and Short. Kimmel saw the messages focus on Southeast Asia as relieving him from any immediate obligation. Policy changes. So there were, after the attack on Pearl Harbor, there was improved information and sharing analysis. This included the establishment of the Office of Strategic Services and a precursor to the CIA. There was also more military mobilization. The US rapidly increased its military mobilization efforts, expanding the Army, Navy, and Air Force to prepare a full scale war. This included conscription and increased production of war materials as well. There were also strengthened alliances. The US strengthened alliances with other nations, notably forming the allies with the UK, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, enhancing coordinated military efforts against Axis powers. And overall, this led to a more proactive and prepared military. Thank you.